The warning that went unheeded. The crystalline chambers of the Celestial Dominion High Command buzzed with tension as representatives from 12 star systems gathered in emergency session. The vast circular room, carved from living mineral that pulsed with bioluminescent light, had witnessed countless strategic discussions over its 3,000-year history. But never had the atmosphere been this desperate, this charged with the electric fear of extinction. Commander Valen Cross of the Dominion Fleet stood at the central podium, his 6 arms gesturing urgently at the holographic display that dominated the space above them. The projection showed a sea of red spreading across the galactic map like a malignant infection. Each crimson marker represented a world consumed, a civilization erased, a population either dead or assimilated into the endless hunger of the Void Swarm. The Void Swarm had emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies 18 months ago. No one knew where they came from or what drove them. They were not conquerors seeking territory or resources. They were devourers, pure and simple, consuming everything in their path with mechanical efficiency. Biological matter, technology, even the minerals of dead planets, nothing was safe from their insatiable appetite. In 18 months, they had consumed 47 star systems. Billions of lives had been extinguished. The Dominion's most powerful battle fleets had been reduced to scattered remnants, and now Commander Cross was proposing what many considered the last desperate option available to them. The conscription protocol must be enacted immediately, Cross announced, his primary voice resonating through the chamber, while his secondary vocal cords provided harmonic emphasis. Every world under Dominion protection, every species that has benefited from our security must contribute to the war effort. We require ships, soldiers, resources, and strategic positions. There can be no exceptions. Delegate Thrin, whose species had evolved in the crushing gravity of a super-Earth, slammed 3 of her massive fists against her console in agreement. The outer colonies have remained neutral for too long. They enjoy our trade networks and protection, yet contribute nothing when crisis strikes. This ends now. Agreed, chimed in Counselor Vex, his insectoid form clicking with agitation, particularly the younger species. They lack the perspective to understand what extinction means. They must be made to fight, whether they wish to or not. The holographic display shifted, zooming in on a small yellow star in an unremarkable spiral arm of the galaxy. A blue-green planet rotated peacefully in the projection, its surface swirled with white clouds and deep oceans. Earth, the 3rd planet of the Sol system, home to humanity, a species that had achieved faster-than-light travel only 73 years ago. The human homeworld occupies a strategic position, Commander Cross continued. Their system sits along one of the Void Swarm's projected advance routes. Additionally, their industrial capacity has grown remarkably in recent decades. Their shipyards, their manufacturing centers, their raw manpower, all of it must be mobilized for the Dominion's defense. They have been observed but not formally contacted beyond initial diplomatic exchanges, noted Minister Quell, whose translucent form shimmered with data streams. Our protocols suggest another century before full integration. They are not ready. We do not have another century, Cross snapped. We may not have another year. The swarm's advance is accelerating. If we do not establish defensive positions in the Sol sector, the entire quadrant will fall within months. As the debate intensified, a figure stepped forward from the observer's gallery. General Karvesh moved slowly, his movements deliberate and weighted with authority. The Velkarian commander was ancient by the standards of most species present, having served in the Dominion military for over 2 centuries. His reptilian features were scored with scars that no medical technology could fully erase. Reminders of battles fought in conflicts most present had only read about in historical archives. The general's arrival caused an immediate hush. His reputation preceded him. Karvesh had commanded fleets in the Shattering Wars, had negotiated the peace at Terminus Gate, and had personally prevented the genocide of the Crystalline Collective during the Purge of Lights. When Karvesh spoke, even the most arrogant delegates listened. I must object, Karvesh said quietly, his voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber despite its softness. The conscription of Earth would be a catastrophic mistake. Commander Cross's mandibles clicked with irritation. General, with respect, your strategic expertise is valued, but we face extinction. We cannot afford sentiment or outdated protocols. This is neither sentiment nor protocol, Karvesh replied, his amber eyes fixing on the commander with unsettling intensity. This is strategic necessity. The humans must remain neutral. Not for their sake, but for ours. Confusion rippled through the assembled delegates. Counselor Vex leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's light in 1,000 facets. General, explain yourself. How could leaving one minor world neutral serve our strategic interests when we need every available resource? Karvesh approached the central display and, with a gesture, changed the projection. The galactic map disappeared, replaced by footage from decades past. The delegates watched as a human vessel, battered and outdated even by the standards of its own time, limped through space toward a station under attack by unknown hostiles. 38 years ago, Karvesh began, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller, I commanded the Dominion observation fleet monitoring humanity's early expansion into their local system. Our mission was simple: watch, record, assess, and report. Do not interfere. Do not make contact beyond the minimal diplomatic exchanges required by treaty. The footage showed the human ship accelerating, despite visible damage to its hull, plasma fires venting from multiple breaches. This vessel was the civilian transport Defiant Hope, carrying 600 colonists to a new settlement on the 4th planet of their system. They were farmers, engineers, teachers, families seeking a new life among the stars. The projection shifted to show a research station, clearly not of human origin, surrounded by 3 aggressive vessels bearing the markings of the Kresh pirate clans. This was Observation Post Meridian, a Dominion facility with 42 personnel studying a rare stellar phenomenon. The Kresh attacked without warning, seeking to steal our research data and technology. Delegate Thrin growled low in her throat. The Kresh were exterminated 15 years ago for their crimes. Indeed, Karvesh acknowledged. But on that day they were very much alive and very much in the process of killing my people. The station's distress signal was broadcast on all frequencies, including those primitive enough for human receivers to detect. My fleet was 6 days away at maximum speed. There was no possibility of our arrival in time. The footage showed the human ship changing course, angling directly toward the battle. Captain Sarah Mitchell received that distress call. She understood immediately that the transmission came from aliens, from beings her species barely knew existed. She also understood that her ship was civilian, unarmed, and carried 600 souls who had entrusted her with their lives. She changed course, Karvesh said simply, without hesitation, without debate, without seeking approval from her government or consulting with her passengers. She simply changed course and accelerated toward the battle. The chamber watched in silence as the human ship approached the Kresh vessels. The pirates, clearly amused by the audacity of such a primitive craft, turned one of their attack ships to intercept. What happened next defied all logical tactical assessment. The Defiant Hope did not slow down. It did not attempt evasive maneuvers. It accelerated directly toward the Kresh raider, engines burning at what must have been catastrophic overload. At the last possible moment, the human ship rolled, presenting its reinforced cargo bay doors to the impact. The collision was devastating. The Kresh raider, designed for speed and hit-and-run tactics, crumpled under the impact of the much larger human transport. Both vessels spun away from each other, trailing debris and atmosphere, but the Defiant Hope, built for the rigors of deep space colonization, held together. Impossible, breathed Minister Quell. The structural integrity alone should have failed. The crew should have been liquefied by the G-forces. Yes, Karvesh agreed. By all reasonable calculations, that maneuver should have killed everyone aboard. Yet somehow Captain Mitchell had positioned every colonist in the reinforced cargo holds, had them secured in makeshift crash harnesses constructed from equipment webbing and emergency supplies. 73 people died in that impact. The rest survived. The footage continued, showing the remaining 2 Kresh vessels turning their attention to the crippled human ship. But the Defiant Hope was far from finished. Escape pods launched from multiple points, not fleeing away from the battle but accelerating toward the research station. The Kresh, confused by this suicidal behavior, initially ignored them. That proved to be their second fatal mistake of the day. As the footage revealed, each escape pod had been modified during the approach. Human colonists working in the vacuum of space with nothing but basic tools and desperate ingenuity had converted their only means of escape into improvised missiles. Each pod carried a crude but effective explosive device constructed from mining equipment and fuel reserves. The escape pods struck the Kresh vessels with devastating precision. Hulls breached, systems failed, and the pirates found themselves suddenly fighting for their own survival rather than conducting a routine raid. The remaining human colonists, now aboard the Dominion research station, helped the alien researchers fortify the facility's defenses, using a combination of Dominion technology and human improvisation. When my fleet arrived 6 days later, Karvesh said quietly, we found the station intact, the Kresh vessels destroyed or fled, and all 42 of my personnel alive. We also found that of the 600 human colonists, 197 had died. Captain Mitchell herself was in critical condition, kept alive only by our emergency medical intervention. The general paused, letting the weight of those numbers settle over the assembly. I visited Captain Mitchell in the medical bay. Despite her injuries, despite her losses, the first words she spoke to me were questions. Had we arrived safely? Were my people unharmed? When I confirmed that yes, all 42 Dominion personnel had survived, she smiled. She smiled and said that the sacrifice had been worth it. Then she asked if we could help her get her remaining colonists to their destination, because they had come too far to give up on their dreams now. Commander Cross shifted uncomfortably. General, this is a moving story, but I fail to see how it relates to our current crisis. One act of heroism decades ago does not change our strategic requirements today, doesn't it? Karvesh turned to face the commander directly. That was my thought as well initially. I believed Captain Mitchell and her crew were exceptional individuals, outliers among their species. So I began to study humanity more carefully. I reviewed their history, their conflicts, their cultural development, and I discovered something that terrified me far more than the Kresh pirates ever did. The holographic display shifted again, showing a rapid montage of human history. Ancient battles, medieval sieges, industrial wars, nuclear standoffs, each conflict more devastating than the last. Yet through it all, humanity persisted, adapted, and somehow emerged stronger from each catastrophe. Humans are not unique because they are brave, Karvesh explained. Many species possess courage. They are not unique because they are intelligent or creative or adaptable. Many species share these traits. Humans are unique because they possess something I can only describe as willful defiance of reality itself. When faced with impossible odds, when confronted with certain defeat, humans do not accept the logical outcome. They reject it, and then they find a way to make reality conform to their rejection. Poetic, Counselor Vex commented dryly, but hardly relevant to military planning. Is it not? Karvesh's voice hardened. Let me be clear about what happens if we conscript Earth into this war. The Void Swarm will identify humanity as a threat, and will prioritize the elimination of their homeworld. This is tactically sound, and we know the Swarm operates on pure tactical logic. They will assault Earth with overwhelming force, expecting humanity to surrender or evacuate like any rational species would when faced with extinction. The general's expression grew grim. But humans are not rational, not by our standards. They will not surrender. They will not evacuate. They will fortify their cities and fight in the ruins. They will convert their civilian infrastructure into weapons production. They will sacrifice billions if necessary, and still continue fighting. And most critically, they will remember every single death, every destroyed city, every lost colony. They will remember, and they will pursue revenge with a patience and dedication that spans generations. Then they will die, Commander Cross stated flatly, and the Swarm will move on. We gain their industrial output during the conflict, and while their ultimate fate is regrettable, it serves the greater good of Dominion survival. You still do not understand, Karvesh said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, which somehow made it more powerful. Humans do not lose wars. They transform them. If the Swarm attacks Earth, humanity will not fight to win in any conventional sense. They will fight to ensure the Swarm pays such a catastrophic price for every meter of ground that victory becomes meaningless. They will turn their entire world into a weapon, their entire species into ammunition, and in doing so they will teach the Swarm something dangerous. Teach them what? Demanded Delegate Thrin. That organic life can be more destructive, more persistent, and more terrifying than any force in the universe when pushed beyond the breaking point. The Void Swarm currently views us as food sources, as resources to be consumed. But if they encounter humanity at total war, they will learn to view organic life as a threat. They will stop seeing us as prey and start seeing us as enemies that must be completely annihilated, no matter the cost. Karvesh gestured at the galactic map. Right now, the swarm consumes worlds but leaves infrastructure intact for potential later use. They take prisoners for study. They follow patterns of behavior that, while devastating, remain somewhat predictable. But if humans force them into a war of mutual annihilation, the swarm's tactical algorithms will adapt. They will learn to completely sterilize every world they encounter, to leave nothing behind that could potentially harbor resistance. The war will transform from a struggle for survival into a campaign of absolute genocide. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Minister Quell's form flickered with agitation. "You are suggesting that humanity's involvement would make the war worse for everyone?" "I am certain of it," Karvesh replied. "I have spent decades studying humans, longer than any other member of this council. I have watched them turn defeats into legends, disasters into rallying cries. I have seen them survive situations that would end most species, and I am telling you with absolute conviction that forcing humanity into this war will transform it from a crisis we might survive into an apocalypse that destroys everything we are trying to save." Commander Cross's voice was ice. "Then what do you propose, General? That we allow one world to remain safe while billions die? That we ignore a strategic resource because you fear human irrationality? I propose that we leave humanity alone until they choose to act on their own terms. If and when they decide to join this conflict, it will be because they have assessed the situation and determined their own path forward. A humanity that fights by choice is an ally we can work with, can reason with, can strategically coordinate with. A humanity forced into war becomes something else entirely, something we cannot control or predict." The vote was called despite Karvesh's objections. The measure passed by a significant majority. Earth would receive the conscription order within the week. All human industrial output would be redirected to war production. All able-bodied humans would be subject to military service. The Sol system would become a forward defensive position in the Dominion's desperate struggle against the Void Swarm. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Commander Cross approached General Karvesh. "Your concerns are noted, General, but the decision is made. Perhaps your fears are overstated. Perhaps humanity will surprise you by adapting smoothly to their new role in the galactic community." Karvesh looked at the commander with an expression that might have been pity. "Commander, I have fought in 7 major conflicts across 2 centuries. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed the extinction of species and the birth of new civilizations. In all that time, I have learned one absolute truth. Be very, very careful about what you force a desperate species to become, because you may create an enemy far more dangerous than the one you were trying to defeat. Humanity will adapt or humanity will fall. Either way, the Dominion survives. Will it?" Karvesh asked quietly. "I wonder if any of us will survive what comes next." The general left the chamber, his departure marked by an ominous silence. 3 days later, the Dominion vessel Herald of Unity entered Earth's orbital space and transmitted the conscription order. Humanity had 72 hours to comply, to transform their society into a war machine dedicated to the Dominion's survival. In the governmental chambers of Earth, leaders watched the alien transmission with expressions ranging from shock to anger to grim determination. They had been aware of the Void Swarm's advance, had monitored the situation through their limited but growing network of deep space sensors. They had hoped their relative insignificance would keep them beneath notice, that older and more powerful civilizations would resolve the crisis before it reached their corner of space. That hope had just died. The choice had been taken from them. And as General Karvesh had predicted, humanity's response would not be compliance. It would be transformation, but not the transformation the Dominion expected or desired. The message that Earth sent back to the Herald of Unity was brief, just 3 words that would echo through the galaxy in the months to come. 3 words that should have served as a warning, that should have made the Dominion reconsider their course of action. "We'll remember this." And they would. Humanity always did. The price of ignoring wisdom, the Void Swarm reached Earth's solar system exactly 47 days after the conscription order was delivered. Their arrival was detected by humanity's early warning network, when they were still 3 days out from the inner planets. A massive fleet of biomechanical vessels that defied conventional understanding of both biology and technology. The Dominion had promised defensive support, had assured Earth's governments that conscription came with protection. Those promises proved hollow when the Swarm's advance fleet bypassed the Dominion's defensive positions entirely, using a trajectory that suggested intelligence far beyond simple consumption instinct. They were coming specifically for Earth, and they were coming in overwhelming force. General Karvesh, now relegated to advisory status after his opposition to the conscription policy, watched the tactical displays from the Dominion command ship stationed at Jupiter's orbit. His predictions had been accurate in the worst possible way. The swarm had identified humanity as a newly conscripted military asset and had moved to eliminate them before they could be fully mobilized. "Evacuation protocols are beginning," reported Commander Cross, his voice tight with suppressed tension. "We can extract approximately 15% of Earth's population before the swarm arrives. The rest will need to shelter in place and hope the Dominion's counterattack can drive them off." "They will not evacuate," Karvesh said quietly, his eyes never leaving the display showing Earth's blue surface. "They have no choice. Our transports are already in position. Watch," was all Karvesh said. The first Dominion evacuation ships descended into Earth's atmosphere, targeting the major population centers where the most civilians could be loaded in the shortest time. They found the landing zones empty, not abandoned in panic but deliberately cleared, and waiting at each site was a small delegation of human officials with a written message. The message was identical at every location. "Thank you for the offer. We decline. Use those ships for military supplies instead." "We're staying." Commander Cross stared at the reports in disbelief. "This is madness. We're offering them survival and they're refusing? Do they not understand what's coming?" "They understand perfectly," Karvesh replied. "They're making a choice. You forced them into your war, Commander. Now they're fighting it on their terms, not yours." The Void Swarm's vanguard entered Earth's orbital space 63 hours after the first detection. 300 bioships, each one a nightmare of organic technology that pulsed with malevolent purpose. The Dominion's defensive fleet, 70 ships that represented a significant portion of their remaining military strength, moved to intercept. The battle that followed was brief and devastating. The Dominion vessels fought with professional efficiency, their weapons tearing into the swarm's organic hulls with satisfying precision. But for every swarm ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to emerge from the formation. The bioships had learned from previous encounters, had adapted their tactics and defenses. Within 4 hours, the Dominion fleet had been reduced to scattered remnants, retreating to the outer system to regroup. Earth stood alone. The swarm descended on the planet like a living shroud, their vessels taking up positions in high orbit. The bombardment began at dawn, targeting major cities, industrial centers, anything that represented organized human civilization. Kinetic strikes and bioweapons rained down, turning skylines into infernos and populations into statistics. The Dominion observers, monitoring from their fallback positions, waited for the inevitable. They waited for the surrender broadcasts, for the desperate pleas for assistance, for the breakdown of human civilization under the weight of overwhelming force. General Karvesh waited too, but he was waiting for something else entirely. It came 72 hours into the bombardment. The first swarm landing forces descended on the ruins of what had been New York City, expecting to find survivors huddled in terror, easy prey for assimilation or elimination. Instead, they found resistance. The ruins were not random debris. They were fortifications. Every collapsed building had been deliberately structured to create kill zones and defensive positions. The humans had not fled underground in panic. They had gone underground with purpose, using the subway systems and utility tunnels to create a vast network of interconnected defensive positions. And they were armed. Not with the advanced energy weapons the Dominion used, but with weapons that humans understood intimately: chemical propellants and kinetic force, explosives refined through centuries of warfare, improvised weapons constructed from whatever materials were at hand. The swarm's bioarmor, designed to deflect energy weapons, proved vulnerable to simple lead projectiles fired at hypersonic velocities. The fighting in New York lasted for 3 weeks. The swarm committed more and more forces to the city, unable to comprehend why such a small pocket of resistance required such disproportionate effort to eliminate. When they finally sterilized the entire area with bioweapons that dissolved organic matter at the molecular level, they discovered they had killed over 2 million humans and lost over 40,000 swarm units. The tactical computers aboard the swarm's command vessels processed this information and reached a conclusion that would have alarmed them if they were capable of alarm. The humans were not fighting to win. They were fighting to make victory expensive, and they were succeeding beyond any reasonable calculation. The same pattern repeated across every major population center on Earth. Shanghai, London, Mumbai, São Paulo, Lagos. Each city became a fortress of rubble and determination. The humans adapted to each swarm tactic within days, sharing information through communications networks the invaders could not fully suppress. When the swarm used bioweapons, humans responded with chemical countermeasures. When the swarm tried to cut off supply lines, humans grew food in underground hydroponic farms powered by geothermal energy. When the swarm destroyed infrastructure, humans built new infrastructure from the wreckage of the old. This is unsustainable, Commander Cross stated during a strategic briefing 6 weeks into Earth's occupation. Human casualties are in the hundreds of millions. Their major cities are ruins. Their industrial capacity has been devastated. Why do they continue to resist? Surrender at this point would preserve what remains of their population. Because surrender is not in their vocabulary, Karvesh replied, studying the tactical data with a mixture of admiration and sorrow. Look at the swarm's casualty ratios, Commander. For every human killed, they lose approximately 3 swarm units. Do you understand what that means? Humanity is outnumbered, outgunned, fighting with primitive weapons against an enemy that has consumed 47 star systems. And they are winning the attrition war. Minister Quell's holographic presence flickered with agitation. Winning. General, Earth's population has been reduced by 60%. Their biosphere is contaminated. Their oceans are dying. This is not winning by any definition. It is by human definition, Karvesh said quietly. They are not fighting for territory or resources. They are fighting to ensure the swarm pays such a terrible price that attacking humanity becomes strategically untenable, and they are succeeding. The turning point came on the 93rd day of the occupation. The swarm had committed over 80% of its available forces to Earth, drawn into a planetary-scale battle that consumed resources at an unsustainable rate. The bioships in orbit required constant replenishment of organic matter, and the humans had systematically destroyed or poisoned every potential resource the swarm tried to harvest. Then the humans activated what they called Protocol Scorched Earth. Across the planet, in a coordinated action that must have required months of secret preparation, humanity detonated their entire remaining nuclear arsenal, not as weapons aimed at the swarm, but as a message. Every major remaining city, every industrial complex, every agricultural center was destroyed in nuclear fire by the humans themselves. The message was clear and terrifying in its implications. If the swarm wanted Earth, they could have it. But they would inherit a radioactive tomb, a planet so thoroughly poisoned that even the swarm's remarkable ability to consume organic matter would be challenged for decades. And the cost of taking that tomb had been the destruction of the swarm's largest military concentration in their entire invasion. The Dominion observers watched in horror as mushroom clouds bloomed across Earth's surface like deadly flowers. Commander Cross's voice shook as he spoke. They just committed species suicide. They just destroyed their own world rather than let the swarm have it. No, Karvesh corrected, his eyes fixed on the tactical display showing movement in the asteroid belt. They just declared that they will determine the terms of their own existence, even if those terms include extinction. And they did something else. They bought time. The display showed multiple contacts emerging from concealment in the asteroid field, from hidden positions on Mars and the moons of Jupiter, from locations throughout the Sol system that the Dominion had assumed were too hostile or remote for human habitation. Dozens of vessels, constructed in secret using resources diverted from the conscription orders, using technology shared by the Dominion and improved upon with human ingenuity. These were not military vessels by Dominion standards. They were colony, ships, resource haulers, generation vessels designed for the long journey to other star systems, and each one carried hundreds of thousands of humans, the survivors who had been quietly evacuated not to Dominion worlds, but to humanity's own secret refuges scattered throughout their local space. Impossible, breathed Minister Quell. We monitored their industrial output. We tracked their resource allocation. How did they hide construction on this scale? Because you assumed they would follow your orders, Karvesh said. You assumed conscription meant obedience. Humans heard conscription and understood it as a threat, so they prepared not for your war but for their own survival. While they fought on Earth, they built their future elsewhere. And now, Even as their homeworld dies, their species survives. But the humans were not finished. As the colony ships accelerated toward pre-planned destinations in nearby star systems, the remaining military assets, the few dozen armed vessels humanity had managed to construct, turned toward the swarm's main fleet. These ships were not designed for survival. They were designed for revenge. The human vessels used tactics no Dominion commander would have approved. They rammed swarm bioships at relativistic speeds, turning themselves into kinetic weapons of devastating power. They used their reactors as improvised bombs, detonating in the midst of swarm formations. They broadcast radio signals on all frequencies, taunting the swarm, drawing them into pursuit courses that led through minefields constructed from repurposed industrial equipment, and all the while they transmitted a message, not to the Dominion, not to other species, but to humanity itself. A message that was picked up by every human receiver in the Sol system and beyond, carried on every frequency and repeated endlessly. Remember Earth. Remember what they took from us. Remember what we made them pay. We are humanity, and we do not forget. We do not forgive. And we never, ever stop. The Void Swarm's tactical computers processed the situation and reached an unprecedented conclusion. The resources committed to the Sol system had resulted in catastrophic losses for minimal gain. The organic matter harvested from Earth was poisoned and dangerous to integrate. The remaining human forces were dispersed beyond efficient pursuit. And most critically, the human resistance had demonstrated combat effectiveness that exceeded projections by several orders of magnitude. For the first time in their invasion of Dominion space, the Void Swarm retreated. Not a tactical repositioning, but a full strategic withdrawal. They abandoned the Sol system, leaving behind only monitoring drones to track any remaining human activity. The message in their retreat was clear to any who could read the tactical language of warfare. Humanity was no longer prey. Humanity was a threat that required different protocols, different approaches, and resources the swarm could not afford to expend. The Dominion High Command reconvened an emergency session as reports of the swarm's retreat reached them. The chamber was subdued, the earlier arrogance replaced by something that resembled shock. "Earth is gone," Commander Cross reported, his voice hollow. 92% casualty rate. The biosphere will require centuries to recover. Humanity's homeworld is effectively destroyed. But humanity survives, General Karvesh added. Their colony ships are already establishing outposts in 3 nearby systems. They've salvaged technology from destroyed swarm vessels. And they've demonstrated to the entire galaxy what happens when you force them to fight for their existence. Delegate Thrin spoke slowly, as if still processing what had occurred. The swarm retreated. In 18 months of invasion, they have never retreated from any world. They consumed or were driven off by overwhelming force. But they chose to leave Sol system. They chose to abandon their conquest. Because humans taught them something the rest of us could not, Karvesh explained. They taught the swarm that organic life, when pushed beyond desperation, becomes more dangerous than any force in the universe. The swarm's tactical algorithms have been updated. They will no longer view species like ours as simple resources to be consumed. They will assess threat levels, calculate costs, and make strategic decisions to avoid conflicts that exceed acceptable loss ratios. Then humanity saved us? Minister Quell's form brightened slightly. Their sacrifice forced the swarm to become more cautious, more predictable. Did they save us or did they doom us? Karvesh countered. The swarm is now more intelligent, more strategic in their approach. They will adapt their tactics based on what humanity taught them. And humanity itself, what do you think those survivors are doing right now as they establish their new colonies? The question hung in the air, unanswered but understood. The human survivors were building, preparing, and above all remembering. They remembered the Dominion's forced conscription. They remembered being left to face the swarm alone. They remembered watching their homeworld die while alien observers watched from a safe distance. "We need to establish diplomatic contact," Commander Cross said urgently. "Explain that we did what we could, that the situation was beyond our control. Offer assistance in rebuilding. Reparations, perhaps." "You can try," Karvesh said doubtfully. But I suspect humanity's relationship with the Dominion has been permanently defined. We forced them into a war they did not choose, failed to provide the protection we promised, and survived while their world burned. These are not things humans forgive easily. 3 weeks after the swarm's retreat, the Dominion sent a diplomatic mission to the largest human colony, a rapidly growing settlement on a moon orbiting a gas giant in the Alpha Centauri system. The human response to diplomatic overtures was brief and unambiguous. The message was delivered by Admiral James Chen, grandson of the Captain Sarah Mitchell who had saved General Karvesh's people so many decades ago. His words were recorded and distributed throughout both human and Dominion space, ensuring there would be no misunderstanding about humanity's position. The Celestial Dominion forced our people into a war we did not seek. You promised protection you did not provide. You conscripted our labor and then watched from safety as our homeworld was destroyed. 9 billion human beings are dead because of decisions made in your council chambers. We are humanity's survivors and we carry their memory. Admiral Chen paused, his expression hard as iron. We hereby declare independence from all Dominion authority. We will govern ourselves, defend ourselves, and determine our own future. We do not seek war with the Dominion, but we will not accept subjugation. Leave us alone and we will leave you alone. Interfere with our colonies, threaten our people, or make demands of us again, and you will learn exactly what 9 billion ghosts can inspire survivors to accomplish. The Dominion had 2 choices. They could attempt to force compliance through military action, or they could accept humanity's declaration and hope that time would heal the wounds of recent history. Commander Cross advocated for a show of force, arguing that allowing one species to defy Dominion authority would encourage others to follow suit. General Karvesh offered different counsel. Commander, you have already seen what humans become when forced to fight. Do you really want to discover what they become when fighting by choice, with preparation time, and motivated by vengeance? Let them go. Let them build their new worlds. Perhaps in a few generations, when the current wounds have scarred over, relations can be normalized. But for now, for the sake of every life in the Dominion, leave humanity alone. The vote was close, but wisdom, purchased at terrible cost, finally prevailed. The Dominion officially recognized humanity's independent status and withdrew all claims to Sol System or any human colonies. Trade relations would continue on a limited basis, but there would be no political integration, no military alliances, no interference in human affairs. General Karvesh retired shortly after, his warnings vindicated but his satisfaction hollow. He had been right about humanity, right about the consequences of forced conscription, right about everything, and 9 billion humans had died to prove him correct. In the years that followed, humanity rebuilt with characteristic determination. Their colonies grew into thriving settlements. Their technology advanced rapidly, incorporating lessons learned from both Dominion science and swarm biomechanics. They maintained their independence, trading with other species but forming no permanent alliances, always keeping their own counsel, always remembering. And on the anniversary of Earth's fall, every human colony observed a day of remembrance. They spoke the names of the dead, told stories of the battles, and renewed their commitment to survival. They had lost their homeworld, but they had gained something perhaps more valuable. They had gained absolute certainty about who they were and what they were capable of. The Void Swarm continued its invasion of the galaxy, but its tactics had indeed changed. It no longer simply consumed worlds. It assessed, calculated, and sometimes bypassed targets that presented unfavorable cost ratios. The galactic war ground on, but it had transformed from a simple predator-prey relationship into something more complex, more strategic, and paradoxically more survivable for the Dominion species. General Karvesh, in his retirement, often thought about Captain Sarah Mitchell and the words she had spoken so many years ago, after saving his people at such terrible cost. Was it worth it? He had asked her. Yes, she had said. Then it was worth it. He wondered if the survivors of Earth's fall would say the same thing. He wondered if, given the choice, they would have preferred to remain neutral, to avoid the Dominion's notice, to develop at their own pace without the catastrophic intervention of galactic politics. He would never know the answer, but he suspected it was complicated. Humanity had paid an unimaginable price, but they had also proven something important. They had proven that they could not be broken, could not be consumed, could not be erased from existence no matter the odds against them. And perhaps most importantly, they had sent a message that echoed throughout the galaxy, received by every species watching the conflict between the Dominion and the Swarm. The message was simple but profound. The strong may impose their will on the weak, but they should never ever underestimate what the weak might become when pushed beyond endurance. Force can create compliance, but it can also create enemies who will pursue vengeance across generations and light years, who will sacrifice everything to ensure that aggression comes at a price no rational being would willingly pay. The Dominion had learned this lesson at the cost of 9 billion human lives and the near total destruction of humanity's homeworld. It was an expensive education, purchased in blood and measured in extinct cities and poisoned oceans. And as General Karvesh looked out at the stars from his retirement home on a peaceful world far from the front lines, he wondered if the lesson would stick, or if some future commander would decide that the warnings of history did not apply to their particular crisis. He suspected, with the weight of 2 centuries of military experience, that the lesson would need to be learned again. Empires always believed they were different, that their causes justified any means, that the ends would somehow absolve the costs. And somewhere, perhaps in another galaxy or another age, another species would discover what humanity had proven beyond doubt. Some victories are not worth the price of winning. Some enemies are more dangerous defeated than triumphant. And some warnings, no matter how urgent or how earnestly delivered, must be ignored until catastrophe makes them undeniable. The Dominion had ignored General Karvesh's warning. Earth had paid the price, and the galaxy would remember both the warning and the cost for generations to come. A cautionary tale written in ashes and translated into every language spoken under every star. Humanity survived, but it would never forget, and that perhaps was the most terrifying outcome of all.